Welcome to the World Class Coaching Podcast, where we promote the constant pursuit of development and focus on what really counts towards improving performance in elite sport. I'm Matt Dickens, and this is episode 2 of the World Class Coaching Podcast. Today, I'll be chatting to Richard Husseiny, hearing about what it's like to work in China, the challenges he faced there, as well as how his thoughts on ACL rehabilitation have consequently evolved over the last couple of years. Richard is a great coach who I've learnt so much from over the last few years, so I hope you can too. We've got Richard Husseiny on the line. He's a great coach. I've known Rich almost since I started coaching, and he's always been there to offer advice to guide me through my own development. Nowadays, we continue to chat regularly, and he's always someone I look to first for advice and to challenge my ideas. So hopefully he'll be able to tell us a lot of insight about his job and where he's got to at the moment. Rich, if you could just tell us where you're at now and how you got there.
Oh, well, I will. How did I get into S&C? I went back to quite late. I'd started my degree at 26 at school. I was into cricket. I did quite well at cricket, got to county level, but obviously not good enough to make professional. And then just sort of bummed out really at school and college, and didn't really do anything with that. Didn't have really a focus, and did a few ski seasons in France and went to Greece for a summer. And came back and sort of wanted to be involved with sport still. Did myself a personal training course, did a sports massage course. I actually did my ACL playing rugby, and that kind of got me really focused on how do you come back from this? What happens? And so did my sports massage course, managed to get a job as a sports masseur at Fulham Football Club, which was great, obviously, Premier League club at the time. And just spent time there and asking the coaches, the physios and the coaches, how do you get your job? Like, what do you do? Or how do I get there? And so they told me, gave me the information. So I looked into it further and then went to Chichester University, like I said, when I was 26, did sports therapy, really great course. Then I did my master's in strength and conditioning. And at the same time as me studying, I was at Fulham for 4 seasons, sports massage, did a little bit of rehab, not much. And then with Sean Tagg, went into the academy as assistant S&C. Again, just more of an intern thing, but I was there a long time, but kind of trying out different roles really and what fitted me really. Then opportunities came up with Harlequins RL, Rugby League at the time, now London Broncos. Again, another internship in a totally different environment with the first team. And then the job came up, it was available with EIS, and that was my main focus from the start really. I was always aware of EIS, and I didn't really know what happened actually in the EIS, but I knew that I wanted to be part of it because the reputation and the sports that it worked at. So I got the job with EIS with GB diving, and I had a multi-sport role as well with Paralympic sports and some support, multi-sport support at Bisham Abbey. Which was amazing. And I think that multi-sport background really has helped me just to get a variety. Seeing different environments and working with different coaches just gave me the experience to learn how to adapt into how each environment is different. It's not as straightforward as you think when you're learning S&C. Then after that, went through to the London Games with the divers. And an opportunity came up with Exos in China, between Shanghai and Beijing, with the Chinese Olympic Committee and Shanghai Sports Institute. So I got that job and moved over to China, to Shanghai, and I've had a really amazing experience over there, both personally and also professionally. And that's been my last job. I've recently had to leave that due to family bereavement, but that's kind of where I am up to at this point right now.
Fantastic. And you've been in China, for about 2 years. Am I right?
Yeah, just over 2 years. and worked with multi-sport over there. Really worked with British diving. Worked with China diving. Worked with Shanghai football, female football, which is a great experience. And this last year, been with judo. Again, another very different experience, but and a great sport actually. Judo is a fantastic sport to work in.
Fantastic. China must have been one hell of an experience.
Yeah, it really was amazing. I mean, personally, it was just incredible. It's like you're on another planet. Language barrier, the culture difference. It's not like you can have your address written down in English and someone can read it. If it's not in Chinese characters, you are screwed. And that's when you first get off the plane. You're kind of on your own, really. And they're just little things you've got to learn and you get used to. And once you get through that, I said the first 6 months, which is pretty tough, I found, once you understand the little, I guess, the little ways of coping with all those things, then life becomes a lot easier and you can start to enjoy it. I mean, it's always enjoyable, but it's a bit intimidating as well to start with.
How's your Mandarin?
不好.
I'll take that as fluent.
Yeah, fluent rubbish.
Okay, that's great. So moving on a little bit. So from an S&C point of view, what were the main challenges you faced, and how did you have to change the way you operated whilst you was in China?
The main challenges, there were so many challenges. I had no background of anything before I got there. I didn't have any idea of what level the athletes were. And what I mean by that is I know what internationally they were, but I didn't know what training history they were, what exact injuries they had, what movement problems they had. Nothing was getting passed on to me. It was like starting from scratch. So just, yeah, a total lack of understanding of what was in front of me. That's on the floor with the athletes. In terms of other challenges, I mean, the language is clearly the main one. The cultural differences, it's the way they operate, the hierarchical structure of everything. You might have a head coach, but there's someone above that, the leader or leader above that, that pretty much directs the program. And that's why kind of Chinese whispers comes from, really. There's such a flow of messages that comes from the top all the way down, reaches you, and then goes all the way back up. And it's so many things get changed along that route. So it's just learning how to work within that culture and understanding how you need to change your conversation or how you need to change your communication across the large range of people that needs to hear about it.
I think from a couple of conversations we've had in the past, like you've always mentioned their hard work ethic, resiliency, and dominance to volume. Like, how did that influence like the way you had to deal with? Was there like movement problems, or just their approach to training is obviously very different to what we're used to in the UK?
Totally different. Totally different. There's a big difference between the technical aspects and the S&C aspects. Hard work is rewarded in China. Hard work is seen as the main method of getting adaptation, or the main method of developing athletes. So there is, mental strength is a huge characteristic needed to be an athlete in China. There's so many people that go for different sports, especially the blue ribbon sports in China, which would be the badminton or the diving or the gymnastics or the table tennis, plus many others. But there's just a huge mental resilience needed to cope with the demand of training, the system that you're in, the daily routines. And the daily routines are just such routine to the T, to the hour. There's a lot more laughter than I thought I would encounter in China. So there is a very good team bond. almost a military style way, really, where you're all in this together, you're getting putting through this together, but they all come together as a unit and support each other very, very well. In terms of the volume or the movement discrepancies or movement quality, that was my main challenge to start with. I can't really do anything about them. I couldn't do anything about the volume in terms of how much they trained away from S&C. But what I could do was change the quality of the movement. And before, again, more is better in China. So loading was seen as good. You need to load, 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 load. But what was maybe misunderstood, well, definitely was misunderstood, was the quality of movement can give you so much more. So for me, my main focus was literally going back to basics, just teaching, coaching from the ground, looking at quality, looking at how they do things, looking at giving them some understanding of why they're doing that. Not, many times I was witnessing people just doing an exercise because they were told to do it, not doing an exercise, and these are the benefits you can get from it, and these are the negatives you get from it if you don't do it correctly. So that was my main first step in China, was to just try and start with the basics.
Always the best place to start, right?
Always, always, always. Especially if you're a simpleton like me.
Touche, I'm exactly the same. Okay, mate, that's fantastic. And it sounds like you did a lot of educational sort of work whilst you were there as well, like with your athletes. If I'm right, obviously you said the contract was with Exos.
Yes.
What would you take from like the Exos way or Exos systems and put into your own way of doing things, your own system?
What would I take from it? I think it just underlines a multidisciplinary approach is the best way. They've got their 4 pillars. That's not really any different to the way I've experienced at the IS. Yes, it's a system, and it's in their the way they've developed their system, but the same principles apply in their system to any decent and quality method, quality system. Sorry, and just the multidisciplinary approach, working together as a team to achieve the goals for the athlete, the goals of the athlete.
Okay, that's brilliant. Thanks. Like specifically, like I know you said the last year you spent working with judo, but before that you worked with women's football, right?
Yes.
In Shanghai?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And I also happen to know that you just wrote a small blog post on ACL rehabilitation.
Yeah, a waffle.
A waffle. Wow. I don't know. It was interesting. Like I always find your ideas interesting. Basically, like I know ACL was a bit of a problem for you in or injury at least was a bit of a problem like with the women's football over there. Like how much of a problem was it?
Massive, massive, massive problem. It comes down to what I was saying about the movement. There's no focus on quality of movement. So valgus is just not even hitting the radar on what they're seeing, especially in female athletes. This is in male athletes as well as female athletes. But there was just no awareness of quality of movement, which was fueling this underpinning weakness that's going through the whole squad. So tell me your question again. I've totally forgotten it.
It was just a general question of how much of a problem was it? You've already answered the question,
right.
Rich.
Yeah, just massive. Yeah, sorry, I was drifting off. Just a huge problem, and that was the main underpinning factor that was contributing to the large knee injuries like the ACLs, but also the meniscal problems, the knee pain, general knee pain.
Just to give the listeners an idea, just because you have told me on a previous conversation, did you have something like 11 out of 30 athletes had an ACL injury?
Yeah, 11, and that's separate to the meniscal problems and all the other knee pains. That's just knee, and then of course you got the back issues, and there's so many problems, and that's where I said like it's mental toughness to get through that pain and it was sad to see. There's nothing I could do about the culture, but it's sad to see it. And what I could help with was to alleviate some of that and to just try and help and educate as much as I could.
Wow. Sounds like a much bigger problem that you have there than I do with skiing. Like it's probably our highest risk factor skiing as an ACL
Mm.
injury. So when you start an ACL rehabilitation, like where do you start? What's your process? Where does that begin?
Um, from my experience in China, that was kind of the first place I've really worked properly with ACL rehab. Anyway, apart from myself, for me it was just understanding where they were and looking at what was available to me, and to use it as like a project myself. Really, like I said, it was the first time I was working with ACL, so I had isokinetic, I had force plates that was available to me. So I tried to use that to the best of my knowledge and to get the information that most directed my program. For me, really, out of everything, I mean, still isokinetic, I'm not a master on that at all, and it gave some figures. But for me, force plate was what I used and what I focused on, impulse in particular, just with some of the research I was reading regarding activation, particularly of the hamstrings. I know the force plate doesn't focus on that, but looking at rate of force development, that's one of the key factors found in, I'll give you the name of the study, I can't quite remember it. But that was one of the key factors in reducing ACLs in females, speed of activation under 50 milliseconds. So that kind of fueled my thought process, right? How can I get a gauge of rate of force, I suppose? And looked into impulse and looking at between leg differences, because like I said, there's no baseline data. There was nothing to look back on historically. I just had the good leg. Um, so yeah, that was my main, I guess, strength diagnostic tool that I used. In terms of other methods of assessment, I looked at FMS. I used FMS because it was simple. It wasn't. It was already valued in the Chinese system. There's no point me introducing anything else. Now, I think FMS does offer some good points to it. There are some things that I probably wouldn't use in the future. I won't use in the future. But I used FMS as their movement screen. I used the Y balance as their movement screen, or the unilateral movement screen, because I feel personally that offers good value in between leg differences. I looked at unilateral tuck jumps through 10 seconds, looking at between leg differences in terms of how many contacts, mechanical approach, um, and that was just simply recorded via iPad. And then I looked at single leg, single hop, and single leg, triple hop. So looking at, again, mechanical process, how they're absorbing the load in a triple hop, how they're resisting the load or stopping, decelerating from single and triple. And again, filming that, comparing that, both the distance, but looking at the quality of the landing. That was in the gym. Sorry, that was in the gym. And then out on the field, introduce cutting drills, simple plyos, landing. Just looking at landing, looking at deceleration, educating that, because none of this was educated. They're all really talented. Some of these girls have really great international careers, but they've never been shown how to move properly, never been shown or taught how to decelerate, how to land properly. So just introducing really simple things to just, I had no gauge on it, but just looking at trying to educate them and teach them how to do that and why you need to do that. And particularly one athlete, just the one athlete that I worked with ACL for a long period of time, just came on phenomenally. Yeah.
Fantastic. So you talk about how they came on, and it looks like with those screening tools and getting a baseline test of where they're at, you
Mm.
can start to build quite an elaborate picture, like with the tools that you had.
Yeah.
How does that progress, and how do you move that back towards the specific demands of their sports?
How they progress. Again, they do so much of their sport, and whatever their sport was, in terms of their drills and the repetitions and all of that stuff, I knew they were going to be getting a lot of that. So in terms of progression, I had total control. There was a main competition. The China Games was the main competition in August, end of August. So I knew I had her up until June, very beginning of June. So for me, it was quite easy to progress, both strength exercises, landing, plyos, and for example, um, a stick box drop. So unilateral, dropping off a box with a stick on your back, looking at control and looking how they absorb the load. That was very easy. The athlete determined the progression of that. The quality of the landing determined the progression of height. So I knew that her confidence was going up and also her quality was going up. For example, that's just a one-off exercise, an example of one exercise I used. But the progressions were easy to manage in terms of, so the single leg plyos, twice a day training with me. Not that we're doing plyos twice a day, but the progressions were just me looking at her, how her movement. I was monitoring each week with the impulse and with the single leg hops. Sorry, I forgot that. But each week the progressions were, it was easy to make the progressions. And I'm not giving you exact progressions I was making, but it was very subjective, as well as the objective data that I was getting from the impulse that was guiding my prescription of exercise, really.
Oh, that's really insightful, Rich. Obviously, I'm kind of getting the impression that you're progressing that work and those plyometric works based on what the athlete's capable of, as opposed to a set structure.
Very much
okay,
so.
say this week we're going to do this much volume. This week we're going to do a little bit more volume. Like you're basing it on the individual themselves and progressing as they're able.
Very much, exactly that. Yeah, I wasn't very clear last time. Yeah, exactly that. Just looking at what's in front of me and looking at how they're developing on a daily basis or a weekly basis. Of course, there's a plan, but there's no point progressing if they're not ready to go.
No, I think that's an important development that S&C's made in like recent years. Obviously, it's very easy to teach out of a textbook. This is the progression and this is the plan. But at the end of the day, when you've got an athlete in front of you, they could do some of that plan. They could be ahead on some aspects, like by weeks, and they could be behind on other aspects by a week or two. Being adaptable and coaching what's in front of you, I think, is an essential part of actually learning on the job and that you gain with experience.
Yeah, very, very much. Like I said, I used the tools I had available to me, and I was using it as a project myself to learn, using the impulse as my gauge of, that was my key strength diagnostic tool that I took from that. Yeah, just looking what's in front of you and coaching what's in front of you. Definitely have a plan. You've got to have an outline of where you're going to and what you need to get to. But if you're not, you can't force it. Just to have confidence in sticking with that plan. If it's not where you thought it was going to be, don't panic. Just stay with it. And as long as you're taking into account what's happening and you've got some form of measures that you're looking at, then you're relatively confident you're on the right lines. Like you don't need complex stuff. You just need to be looking at the athlete and where they are and have the goal of where you're aiming.
Fantastic. I think one of the key points made in David Joyce and Dan Lewinden's book High Performance Training for Sports.
Yeah.
There's a section in that on rehabilitation, and it's all about structuring that process as outcome based.
Yeah.
And I think that's the very much impression that I get from you on a similar kind of process.
Very much, yeah.
Yeah, thinking of the final outcome then, how do you know that they're fit to compete again?
How do you know they're fit to compete? I think you've got to be looking at them on the field. You've got to be progressing their sports skill. Like I said, I had control of that up until a certain point. So I knew come June, whatever it was, to the tour in Japan, like I had control. And what I was saying about the hierarchical system, I knew that at that time, whether she was ready or not, she was going to be playing, whether I liked it or not. And that's just the culture. So for me, there were elements of, right, we've got to start testing this. And looking at her movements on the field, so cutting, looking at deceleration, jumping, her landing, and then progressing that from a very controlled environment and into a very more chaotic environment, reactive environment. And then finally looking at under fatigue and seeing how she's coping with that fatigue. I would say that if I had it my way, then she probably wouldn't have returned when she did. But on the reverse of that, I know that she went back to play. She played she got her game fitness. She played very well, and then she played in the tournaments that she was aiming to play in. So if you look at it as a success, that was a success. Like she successfully returned to play without re-injuring the same knee.
So since that return to play, and obviously that whilst you were there, it changed your whole mindset on the approach to athletic development, especially within China or within women's football. Did you do anything specifically for the whole squad with regards to ACL rehabilitation? Anything more than just re-educating movement patterns, or?
No, it was as simple as that. There was no need for anything else. Yes, we cleared up. I was working with. At the time, I was kind of the only one there, and then I had a colleague come over, Mike Minthorn, he's now at Aston Villa actually, but we worked together, just clearing movement up, and then Mike took over the main general program of the strength and conditioning, but just looking at clearing up the movement, working on the simple things, landing, deceleration, the control in the gym, and just stripping the load down.
So your main message there has got to be, with regards to injury prevention, there's so much to be gained from perfecting movement competency, I guess.
From my experience in that environment, yes, definitely. I'm not to undervalue strength components and all the other stuff along the continuum, but I think if you haven't got that at the start, there's no point loading. You've just got to clearing the movement up is going to give you so much more, and so much more down the road as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Rich. No, I really, really like your concept there, and really agree with it, I guess. Let's move on to the other questions, shall we?
Okay, all right.
Question time. This is the part of the show where I'll put a couple of regular questions to my guests regarding their morning routines, their go-to learning resources, their approach to influencing technical staff, and it's also your opportunity to ask a question, as I will pick one or two in advance from the ones that you send me. Cool. So, Rich, time for just a few shorter questions. Number one, I'm personally a big believer in creating a positive environment and being a positive influence. What do you do to ensure you're in a positive mood and creating a positive environment before working with your athletes?
The main thing for me is to be organised, just being organised. If you're organised, for me anyway, I'm prepared and I'm relaxed and I'm in a good frame of mind and I'm focused. Getting up early, depending what time the session is in the morning. For me, I'm awful in the morning, so getting up early, giving myself enough time to wake up and get to work on time, like early, so I've got time to prepare. Or just nothing special, just give myself time, organised, and everything flows from then.
Sounds like perfect planning prevents piss poor performance.
Yes.
Something like that. Fantastic. Great. Question two. Possibly one of the hardest parts of the job is influencing other members of the support staff, especially technical coaches. How do you do this effectively, and how did this differ between England and China?
Firstly, how do I do this effectively? I mean, for me, I feel and I believe that that's one of my strongest sides of the softer skills needed to be a S&C coach. It's like building relationships, getting to know someone, asking them what they need. I'm not the center of the program. The athlete is the center of the program, and it's the coach's program. So, asking them the right questions, asking them what they need, and spending time with them, getting to know them, and showing that pay attention, learn about the sport. That's always, for me, broken the ice from not knowing anyone at all to getting into someone's not friendship, but starting to get some buy-in with the athlete and with the coach. Number two part of that question, you were saying about China. How does that difference between the West and in China? Really, it's not that much different. They're still human beings. They're still this the way to get on with someone is pretty much the same. The challenges were the language, obviously, and the cultural differences, but spending time with them, showing them that you're interested in their program, showing them that you're interested in the athletes, telling the athletes you're interested in them, asking the athletes. Um, you had to use an interpreter, but kind of spending some time with the athletes and asking them questions about their training, what they need, where are they, what are their problems, where do they want to be. Investing time in learning about what they want really just made them feel like I cared and made them feel that I'm in it with them rather than, oh, this is someone else I've got to listen to. Um, you could argue that that's their system and that's how you should be in it. That's what they're used to, being told what to do. But that's not natural to me. And as much as I had to fit in with the Chinese system, that's not how I operated. And I think having a human touch to what sometimes is not the most human of programs or environments really offered some light with them, and it certainly offered their buy-in to come in and train hard with me and to focus. Um, Many times I saw their training that had very little intent or very little quality to it. Probably down to the repetition factor of they're always doing the same thing. So for me, being more human, got their buy-in, and certainly gave them more output in the gym from what I needed or what I wanted.
Fantastic. Sounds like a real personable touch. Question 3 then. If you can recommend just one website, newsletter, podcast, and book to other S&C coaches, what would they be?
For me, I've probably got 2 books actually, if that's all right. If I now 2 books. One would be The Little Book of Clarity by Jamie Smart. Um, I think that's amazing in the sense that for me anyway, my personality is I've got a lot going on in my head and I just need to create some space. And I just think it offers a very simple, it's not even a method, it's an explanation of certain ways of how to clear your head. And the second one is Rise of the Superman. I can't remember who that's by. But it's Rise of the Superman. If you type it in,
Stephen Clotter.
Yes, yeah, that's it. That is a great book, and it's about the flow state, so the psychological state in extreme athletes, but also how you can apply that in your everyday life as well. Not necessarily how you can, but an insight into it's possible to attain that in your normal life, and there are certain places to go and research further from that book. But I really enjoy those books. In terms of website, for me, latest websites recently, I've taken a lot from Mladen Jovanovic's website. It's a subscription-based website, but there's a lot of really, really great info on there and thought processes on there. And then Martin Beisinger, the Swiss throws coach, well, he's actually a thrower as well, but Swiss throws coach. He's got some great, great insights into approaches and methods linked to Bondarchuk, Verkhoshansky as well, and it's some really, really great, interesting articles to read on there. So I've done the books, I've done the website. I think that's it.
Newsletter, podcast?
Newsletter, podcast. So SSC podcast, apart from yours, Matt, of course. Pacey Performance, I think, is very good. It's not necessarily about the podcast, but it's about the people that he's had on, and I've really got a lot from that. It's just some good discussions. I think as well, Dr. Andy Franklin Miller is also another great podcast. Really practical, very scientific based, but some practical. I've taken a lot of practical things away from that to think about and to try and integrate into my program, my thought processes.
Cool.
That's it.
I think that's enough, mate. You got a bit greedy there, I think. Okay, finally, last question. For all the young and aspiring S&C coaches out there, what would be your top piece of advice?
To make sure you get something from your internships, and it's got to be a two-way thing. You've got to be offering them as well as they've got to be, you've got to be gaining something from that experience. If you're not gaining something from that experience, there is no point in doing it. It doesn't matter what it says on your CV. If you can't transfer those skills that you're learning in one environment, then it's a waste of time because you're not progressing. And I've made that mistake before in the past. Um, so having a clear, goal-orientated internship is is invaluable. I mean, some of the best I know of are the ones at EIS, but there are others around. There's lots of others around, and um, just that's why, in a way, applying for an internship is applying for a job now. It's there's got to be a two-way benefit there, and make sure you're getting skills that you can then take on with you. Second piece of advice is understanding relationships, or building relationships, and having a good look at the overall picture. That might sound simple, it might sound obvious, but I think you've got to realize that and to understand that, and it's not necessarily as simple as it sounds. But they're my two pieces of advice.
Oh, that's fantastic, Rich. Yeah, and being a people person is highly important. It's obviously what's got you so far in your career as well, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It does count for something. You can have the best knowledge in the world. If you can't apply it and you can't get on with people, it's irrelevant. You're not gonna get anywhere. And that's in any job really, but especially S&C. And I think kind of searching out. I mean, you're doing a great job in kind of offering advice to interns and or people coming out. And I think that's why I kind of I value that as well, as giving back, because I know how hard it is at the start, and to be able to come on to here, for example, and to say my thoughts on it. I mean, if anyone values that or not, I don't know, but to be able to give some advice a bit from being there and what the mistakes I made, to try and kind of help people out from where they're starting now is important to me, and to you, obviously.
Yeah, no, mate, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Rich. So thanks a lot for today. If we just sum up then, where can people find you on Twitter, online, anything like that?
Just Twitter, Rich Husseiny. That's simple as that. I'm always open to, like I said, to helping out, or giving advice, or just having any form of discussion. Really, it's I know how hard it is to start, so um, yeah, just if you have any thoughts on where to go or where to start or what to do, I can offer you my opinion. It's not the only opinion at all by far, but if that's what you feel you want to search out, then I'm free to talk.
Mate, you're too humble. I really appreciate you coming on. Like I said, Rich, thanks a lot for today, and we'll speak again soon for sure.
Yeah, all right, mate. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
The relevant reading section is aimed to highlight one article that I've either read or written and believe is worth sharing with you guys. It may be peer-reviewed or it might not be, but I will make sure it's relevant to coaches looking to develop and always get better. This week's relevant reading comes from one of Dan Baker's most recent and detailed articles on the subject of maximum aerobic speed. It's entitled Implementing High-Intensity Aerobic Energy System Conditioning for Field Sports, and you can find it on freelapusa.com. Today, I'm mostly going to tell you how I applied these training principles to the physical development program of alpine skiers. So, Max Aerobic Speed training has been around for a little while now, and Dan Baker has written a few decent articles on it. It's probably one of the most popular aerobic training methods alongside Martin Boucher's 30-15. Basically, the concept of max aerobic speed training came about following various studies through the 90s and early 2000s that showed high-intensity training to be far more effective at improving aerobic power than the traditional long, slow duration methods. These studies include the works of Izumi Tabata, Gregory Dupont, and Martin Boucher, among several others. The main principle is that the time spent training at or above 100% of max aerobic speed is the key parameter that underpins improvements in aerobic power. Specifically, 120% of max aerobic speed has been found to be the optimal speed, as it allows the greatest training impulse, where impulse is defined as intensity times volume. Before I go any further, you might be wondering why I'm so interested in the aerobic energy system when I'm working with alpine skiers. Because at a glance, if you know anything about alpine skiing, races in all disciplines are extremely anaerobic. They last from 60 to 90 seconds, and there'll be two runs that make up the race, each of which is performed a couple of hours apart. So, why do my athletes even need to worry about it? Well, firstly, we know that much like having a foundation of strength can underpin greater power potential, having a solid aerobic base will increase the potential of the anaerobic system. Secondly, and possibly more importantly, is because our training regime is a lot more strenuous than the competition of races. For example, when we're on camp, sessions typically last between 2 and 4 hours. Sometimes we'll train twice a day and often 7 to 10 days in a row. Plus, as opportunities to ski are pretty limited due to the weather and time of year, etc., there's always a lot of work to be done when we're on the slopes. So, the aerobic system is essential to not only underpin performance, but also recover between high intensity bouts of anaerobic exercise and between long, arduous days of training on long camps. Just to recap the physiological side of things, a few adaptations to aerobic training that I like to consider are greater stroke volume, cardiac output, and efficiency, an increased capillarization and oxygen uptake, increased hemoglobin and myoglobin content, a decreased resting heart rate, and an increased buffering capacity, all of which contribute to an increased work capacity, some of which contribute to improving the body's ability to recover between high intensity anaerobic bouts. Plus, we know that regeneration of ATP is far more efficient through aerobic energy systems such as the electron transport chain. So, hopefully, that establishes why I believe there is a lot to be gained by improving my athlete's aerobic system, and that I believe this has the potential to make a huge impact on their performance. Then, the main reason that I choose the maximum aerobic speed approach to improve my athlete's aerobic power now is mostly because I've used it before. I've used it quite extensively in rugby with great results. So I guess most importantly, it's a system that I've read the most into, got the most experience with, and I trust it. The first thing I did was test my athletes. In the past, with different teams, I've used several methods to establish max aerobic speed. The Montreal track test was probably the original, only you need a track for that, and in most team sports, it's easier to either use a yo-yo test, 1500 meter, or 5 minute all out effort. As I don't have easy access to a track at the moment, but I do have a 4G football pitch on site, I use a 5 minute all out effort over 100 meters. This does involve a change of direction every 100 meters, but as Dan Baker points out in the article, although this will reduce the total distance covered in the time and involves some anaerobic contributions, it could be more relevant to the sport and forthcoming prescribed intervals if they also contain changes of direction. Initially, most of the athletes came in around the 1,250 meter mark, which gives a max aerobic speed of 4.16 meters per second. Then, as fitness tests are specific to the test and to have a backup in case someone gets injured, I also do the same 5 minute all out test on a spin bike, rower, and elliptical. And as we play ice hockey once a week, I also tried experimenting with it there too. Just to give a little insight into trying max aerobic speed on ice skates, the main problem I had was with the duration of time, especially during the test, in that low skating position, where the athletes were used to playing ice hockey, they're no pro skaters, and within 5 minutes of continuous skating, some of their lower backs would simply be on fire. So that limited the effectiveness of the test and consequently the training. I now know that there are a couple of specific intermittent ice skating tests out there, which I may consider in the future, but I don't know how these compare to finding a max aerobic speed. And as I said, it was my first time attempting such a protocol on ice. Anyway, it was my attempt to get a good measurable aerobic stimulus into an immeasurable or at least uncontrollable game. And even after just 6 weeks of following a 90-second at 100% MAS 90-second rest protocol with a slightly increasing volume each week, all but one athlete significantly improved their maximum aerobic speed. And that was done alongside a running protocol on a separate day. Um, Whether the improvements attributable to aerobic power or getting better at ice skating is hard to say, but it was interesting nonetheless. Anyway, back to running, and I'll sum up a few of the key concepts within my approach. I mentioned that 120% max aerobic speed has been found to be the most effective speed to train. However, I actually base about 85% of my protocols on 100% max aerobic speed. Basically, because the most important factor influencing adaptation is time spent at or above 100% MAS. And there is quite a significant difference in intensity between 100% and 120%. From a managing fatigue and stress in a full-time schedule point of view, I've simply got higher priorities on the sessions that I want to target as maximal effort or high intensity, and I don't expect athletes to go balls to the wall in every single session. Contrary to what some of them may say, I'm not actually trying to kill them. So I prefer to stick 100% MAS, which is the minimum intensity, to elicit the most effective results. I think I mentioned somewhere earlier that this approach is quite new to my athletes, and especially compared to their long traditional bike rides. Um, Unfortunately, it has been met with some resistance from the coaches who are afraid of change and worried about tendon problems. So I must make a point of noting that there were several tendinopathy type issues before I arrived. However, there aren't anymore. Whilst presenting some research and my structure to tendon loading, as well as my beliefs that on-feet conditioning would be more transferable to skiing, I decided to compromise and include some spin bike-based MAS conditioning on alternate weeks for the senior team and allow the head coach of the junior team to take the younger athletes on a long ride. So I structure the running around that. Normally, at least 2 sessions per week, alternating between a 100% and 70% 15-second rectangular grid, and also using a 90-second work to 90-second rest protocol. I always use the longer intervals to introduce MAS at the start of pre-season in rugby, gradually increasing the intensity from 92% to 96% and 100%, similar to how Dan Baker suggests in the article. I started here with a similar approach, only continued to use it and build on the volume as the time interval is particularly relevant to alpine skiing. And I found that after a few sessions of 90-second intervals, it was working really well. With regards to programming, the prescription of volume and intensity follows the mesocycle for the gym. Two accumulation weeks, one high intensity week, followed by a deload week. The first week will be 2 running-based protocols. The second will build on the volume in each session and add a bike session using similar intervals. The third week swaps the 90-second protocol for a 60-second one at 110% and an additional Eurofit session, which is 15 seconds at 120% with 15 seconds rest. So that's the high intensity week. Then in the deload week, there'll be just 1 running session and an easy bike session where we'll try and get out in the mountains because this is a beautiful country and it's a lot more fun for the athletes. So that's basically how I put it all together. Feel free to drop me a line or any questions if I've missed anything, which won't surprise me as I have tried to make this just a short segment. Hope you enjoyed it and I hope you found it useful. Cheers. Now it's time to discuss personal development. In this section, I'll let you know of any up-and-coming courses or conferences that I'm aware of. I'll also let you know of any decent jobs or internships that might be out there at the moment. So CPD-wise, first up, Jonas Dodu is holding a workshop on acceleration, speed and agility for team sports on the 7th of November at the Lee Valley Athletic Centre. I highly recommend you head along to that. He's becoming quite an authority on the likes of speed development. Next up, I've recently become aware of the courses that the World Athletic Centre put together towards coaching development. They've got a few running through November, December, January. Obviously, that's with a good amount of contact with Dan Pfaff and Stuart McMillan, two world-class coaches. So if you ever get an opportunity to learn from them, I highly recommend you take them up on it. Next up is actually quite soon, on the 15th of October, is the Assess, Treat, Manage, Perform. It's the second one of these workshops entitled Embrace the Chaos, Performance Training for Action Sports. It's led by Darren Roberts, John Noonan and Andy McKenzie. That looks quite set to be quite an exciting day. Also in October, from the 18th to 20th, I mentioned in the last podcast that you've got the Youth Athletics Coaching Congress at the Aspire Academy in Qatar. That would be a fantastic opportunity also. Then for those of you planning something a little further ahead next year, as I mentioned on the last podcast, you've got the Monitoring Training Loads conference also at the Aspire Academy in Qatar. That's from the 23rd to the 25th of February, with the likes of Marco Cardinale and Darren Burgess. Set to be a fantastic learning opportunity, as is always the Research to Practice World Conference. That's based in Melbourne. So anyone in Australia or wants to head that way from the 14th to the 16th of April next year, that will also be a fantastic learning opportunity. Next up, I've spotted a few more internships out there. Again, for those of you in Australia who want to head that way, there's an internship going with the Greater Western Sydney Giants. Obviously, that'll be working with David Joyce. So what a huge opportunity that is. I'll put the link up, as with all the others, on my website, and I highly suggest you check that out. Still plugging the Sussex Cricket internship with which is paid, £11,000 to £12,000. So that's probably one of the best ones out there in the UK at the moment. Another good opportunity is the Derby County Football Club. They've got a full-time internship alongside a funded MRes at Derbyshire University, I believe. So that'll be a good opportunity for you there. There's also a couple more internships at Imperial College London, Sheffield United Academy, University of East London, which are up on the UKSEA website at the moment. So check those out. As well as there's 2 PhD opportunities with the Chiefs Rugby based at Waikato University in New Zealand. You want to check out bases.org for those, which look really exciting as well. Finally, on to jobs then. England Rugby have a job working as an under-18s S&C coach. That is a fantastic opportunity to get involved with the RFU. There's a head of football science and medicine job going at Hibernian Football Club up in Scotland. As I mentioned last week, also, if you check out UK Sport, there are loads of jobs going with Sport Scotland at the moment. There's also a job with England Netball through the EIS. The University of East London have an assistant S&C job. There's, what else is out there? Specialist conditioning coach for the Hong Kong Football Association. That's a new one. I only spotted that today. That's on globalsportsjobs.com. And I'll again put the link on my website. 2 more then. Exos have a position going as a tactical S&C coach, although for that you must be a US citizen. So anyone listening in the States, make sure you apply for that if you want to work with Exos. And also the New York Red Bulls have an S&C coach job available. So if you want to work in Major League Soccer, there's your opportunity to try and get in there. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope that helps you out in your job search or career development. And yeah, we'll look forward to speaking again next week. Cheers. Thanks for listening to the World Class Coaching Podcast. You can catch me on Twitter at MattDickinsSC. The show notes for each episode will be up on the blog over at purehealthpuresport.co.uk, and obviously subscribe to the World Class Coaching Podcast on iTunes or wherever it is that you prefer to listen. Keep pushing forward your development and tune in again soon.